But one of the things that we found that was so exciting was that in two different 18-milers, some 4 weeks apart, I think, your stride rate and your stride length had gone up considerably, which made up for that. What are we talking? We're talking about a 40 to 50 second per mile increase in pace, right? At the same intensity.
That's right. And it was just like a switch went off too. It wasn't a gradual thing. I just noticed one day things just clicked.
Welcome to the RunFORM podcast. I'm Bobby McGee, running mechanics expert.
And I'm Matt Condola, your run-specific strength coach.
Matt and I have been working together for almost a decade on some of the top athletes in the world, and we've decided to share that process with you guys. Hi, everybody. It's time for another RunFORM chat, and we're very privileged this week to have marathon runner Ryan Peel with us, and we're going to do something different this week. We're going to chat to Ryan for a slightly shorter period of time pre the Chicago Marathon, which is what Matt and I have been helping Ryan with, is his preparation for this year's Chicago Marathon. And then after the marathon, we're gonna risk that before and after conversation, right? And so then after the marathon, we're gonna have Ryan on again to speak about his experience there. So I'm pretty excited. Thanks so much for being willing to chat to us, Ryan. I know that these environments, when it comes to your own personal preparation, is normally what happens to the pros, right? The amateurs don't get this opportunity or this pressure to talk about their marathon training in their world.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. As an age group athlete, I thought it would be good to give my perspective on the RunFORM program, having never done anything like this in the past. And I think I can, offer a little bit of insight for others out there.
Yeah, so we have a pretty unique situation, right? You've been working with RunFORM, but you've also been working one-on-one with Matt, and you and Matt are good personal friends, right? And you have a background in both marathon running and ultra-marathon running. And I think you were the last phase of your running career was actually ultra-marathoning, and then you approached me because you wanted to run a fast Chicago Marathon, being a fast course and the like. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you grew up in running.
Sure. So running's been part of my life. Most of my life as a kid, it was more to keep in shape for other sports. I played all the team sports growing up, very active. Running was never really my sport. I think in 8th grade, I ran cross country, and that was my only experience. The rest of my childhood, I spent playing football, baseball, and boxing. When I started boxing, it seemed like I really found my running to keep me in shape for boxing. And then as I got to be a little older and all the team sports went away, running for me has been a place to, find stress relief. And more and more as I've gotten older, it's been something I can continue to do to challenge myself and to really find a stress relief with modern, hectic lifestyle and so forth.
Yeah, so Ryan, first of all, I'm wearing a mask today with you. I do have a camp that I'm doing with Chelsea Sodaro in Kona. I leave in a couple days, and I did promise that I would wear my mask around everyone. So nothing against you. I just have to wear my mask, and I'm on my trip in a couple days. So feeling good and looking forward to Kona camp with Chelsea. But moving into your scenario, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we actually met, how we became friends. I think it's kind of a cool story. I was doing a Silver State race, half marathon trail race, and I won the inaugural race, and that was 15 years ago, I think it was. And so entering this race, forget that I'm older. That's okay. I still, in my mind, want to win. And actually looking at the rankings going into the race, I was ranked first. So I thought, well, I'll just take the lead. And that first part of the course is pretty brutal, right? It's all kind of an uphill climb. And I just know that I was working too hard. I actually talked about this at the podcast at one point about a race where my ego got in the way, but it's also a single track at a big part of the race that once you start the race, then you get on a single track and you climb a mountain. And so you get to kind of this false summit. And at that point, I was already getting a little bit cooked and realizing that I had some guy nipping at my heels. And as soon as there was room to pass, you said, hey, why don't we just switch off from this point on and we can help each other out? And I thought, yeah, okay, great. I'll do my best to do that. And within about 2 or 3 minutes, you were already off in the distance on me. And I knew that I was just going to be on my own for a while. So you ended up winning that race by quite a bit. I was I think third overall is when I got that day.
That's right.
And I definitely thought to myself, wow, that guy's a really, really talented trail runner. I was not used to seeing somebody who would gather the ground so well. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. But I remember after the race, we talked, and I was just coming out with Bobby with RunFORM at the time. And I was telling you a little bit about it. And you were certainly interested, but I felt like a bit of a salesman talking to the guy who beat me about how he could run better, right? But you definitely were open-minded about it. But it was about a year or so that went by before I heard that you were interested in maybe doing RunFORM. And we got to chatting and we bumped into each other at a coffee shop and we decided to give it a go, right? So that's kind of the background. Now we've been working together for this journey about 5 months to get ready for Chicago Marathon. I know it's one of the world marathons that you want to be able to run, and that's on your checklist so you can run all the world marathons, right?
That could be a goal long term. Yeah. So I run Boston, and then this would be the second one, and we'll see where we go from there. But yeah, you planted the seed that day after the race. And I considered I'd never had any professional coaching. I knew I probably didn't have the best run form, and I knew I probably was leaving some stuff on the table by not exploring that. And so it had always been in the back of my mind to maybe work with a professional, someone that could analyze my gait and give me some feedback. I was able to follow a program and train hard, but I didn't really know if I was doing everything right. So. Backing up a little bit, I went through a couple years where I was training really hard and trying. I was running Boston, and I started getting burnout. I was just overcooked, working too much. I own my own little company, and I have 4 kids, and so I got caught up in too many things, and I got a little bit of a burnout. And I still had these goals of running a fast marathon. I'd like to go, sub 250, really sub 245 in a marathon. And I was burnout and I didn't know where to go. And so the idea came up to contact you. And like you said, we happened to run into each other in a coffee shop and sparked the conversation. Next thing I know, I'm working with you guys or working with you first, Matt. And then you introduced me to Bobby. And it's been a great experience. I came in to this program. I think when we talked, it was like 17 weeks out from Chicago. I was overweight. I was undertrained. I hadn't been able to find my mojo. And really, I had a lot of doubts if I could get it together in such a period of time. But you took me on and we just got after it,
Yeah. I mean, listen, first of all, you say that you were a bit deconditioned, right? And to be clear, for you and your standards, I know that was something that you felt like you had to get back, your former fitness. And I think this is an important part of the conversation too, because Bobby certainly needed to be involved with a specific goal like yours and in a shorter time frame like this, because we're not talking about a trail race where I think, quite honestly, your attributes are a little bit more geared for that. But right. To establish RunFORM that is going to really help you to be able to gain ground with really a cadence that was already quite good and gathering that was exceptional, But ultimately, how can we gain more ground with a guy like you that's used to being on trails where those steps are quite different? They can be quite choppy or rooty, even in that movement pattern that you're hitting that's constantly varying and changing. That's where I think we had to relearn some steps so we could get into a better glide, if you will, for the road. And Bobby, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit now about what you were looking at to allow that to happen.
Yeah, there's a number of points I think that in this conversation that we need to touch on. I think first globally, Ryan, maybe just talking about your experience when you first met me, albeit on Zoom, of the kind of questions I asked. Did that leave you confident? Because I always really try and get behind the circumstances of the runner before I get behind the actual training, right? So there's the physiological needs, there's the mechanical needs, but then there's also the logistical needs, is what can the runner do? Can you talk about your experience when you got that questionnaire the first time? Did that leave you more confident? Did that make you feel like, yeah?
Well, I think you asked all the right questions, so for us, just meeting each other, having no history, you definitely asked all the questions to find out what kind of a runner I am. I happen to be more of a diesel kind of runner. I'm not a speedster, or, so physiologically, you asked the right questions. And also, you had me explain kind of when I like to run and how I like to run. If I'm a gadget guy or if I go by feel and those types of things. And for me, I tend to run a little bit more by feel. So when you gave me your feedback and started programming my schedule, I know you were able to do so around my hectic schedule, fit in the runs, the quality runs, and the easy runs on the right days to where they'd be a little more convenient for me. And then with working with Matt in your RunFORM program, I noticed I was getting a kind of a lighter load than what I'm used to. I'm able to run less, train less, but I put a lot of faith in that process because I know you guys get good results. So there was never a question with for me if I was working with guys that were going to get me there. It was just, am I going to be able to get myself there? And so there was a period for a while where I was maybe lacking some confidence because I wasn't used to running so little, I guess.
Thanks, Ryan. That's a very clear answer in terms of how you experienced that. I think that, the low mileage conversation is often, just measured on those miles. So when we had that conversation, we spoke about, are we going to use heart rate? Are we going to use power? Or are we going to use, an RPE scale? And I gave you a 10-point RPE scale that you've used very effectively, but you've been able week after week to report to me what the heart rates are in those workouts and then deliver those data sets from your Stride device that you're wearing, right? And so to me, what was very exciting is we straight away got into, I like to approach the marathon with most athletes on that reverse periodization model, right? Where we start off with the quality work. And perhaps you can just say something about how you felt about yourself and doing those early zone 4 workouts, which to you were RPE 6, RPE 7 workouts, and how you felt about the numbers.
I felt terrible and discouraged, really, because I'd never taken this approach previously. And like I said, kind of coming into the marathon training block, for me, a little less fit than I'd like to be. A lot of those early workouts were so discouraging. I was working so hard. I wasn't hitting the splits I thought I needed to hit. And it was tough. It was definitely something that was challenging. I know that you set me up with the Stride device, but that was neat to be able to see some of the feedback that I was able to get from the Stride device that I was previously unaware of, like my stride length, and I think I had a real accurate cadence. Some of these metrics I'd never had an experience with the feedback. So week over week, I did start seeing a little bit of improvement, and that was encouraging, but those first few weeks of quality workouts were pretty tough.
Yeah, so this is a great opportunity to just quickly, and we've spoken about this before, obviously, but just re-explain to our listeners that whole concept of the connecting or the coupling of pace to effort, right? So initially, when you're doing a marathon training program and you're reverse periodizing it, you're doing the threshold work, the zone 4 work right near the beginning. And the runner, not having experience with this, wants to associate the pace with the intensity, right? And so what we want in the beginning of a marathon program is the intensity, right? So ironically, what's happening now, late in your marathon training, right? What was your zone 4 intensity or your RPE 6 intensity at that point in time is now actually your RPE 5 intensity, right? So you're now doing tempo work, which is more your marathon pace work, at the same pace that you were doing your zone 4 work at the beginning of the program, right? So it just required that modicum of trust and that modicum of patience to be able to see, oh, and now suddenly we're doing that. So my next question then is and I've decided to call it the tale of two 18-milers, right? Because I think it was last week where you made that magic statement that every marathon coach wants to hear, is I am running considerably faster in my aerobic work at the same intensity. So that connection, which previously without devices like the Stride device, right, the power monitor, are kind of difficult to explain. Obviously, there's a huge physiological component, right? Your economy is improving in leaps and bounds. But one of the things that we found that was so exciting was that in two different 18-milers, some 4 weeks apart, I think, your stride rate had gone up considerably, all right, and your stride length had gone up considerably, which made up for that. What are we talking? We're talking about a 40 to 50 second per mile increase in pace, right, at the same intensity.
That's right. And it was just like a switch went off too. It wasn't a gradual thing. I just noticed one day things just clicked. 3 or so weeks ago, I raced an 8K race. I was incredibly unhappy with, how I performed on that. And I was kind of I wasn't doubting you guys. I was doubting myself, and then fast forward a week or so and everything just changed. And now, I think I'm a little less than 4 weeks out from Chicago. And I finally have that confidence that, maybe I still can, do this. I'll be 45 a couple days after Chicago. So I'm definitely not going to be getting too much faster as I age. But I think I have a good shot of letting this play out for, maybe another 10 years and hang in there. Thanks to you guys.
Oh, absolutely. So there's so many little exciting things that come up there. So one of the other challenges we have is you're training at medium altitude, right? So there is a little bit of a conversion factor, and we were talking before we went live that this whole concept of the neurological training your legs to run at that 245 pace at altitude over duration is just not possible, right? Because you're just working too hard, and that emotional, mental connection is there's no way I can sustain this for 26 miles, right? I know I can run this pace, but not for that long. And being able to feel and mentally internalize that is possible at sea level requires some mental gymnastics. So speak a little bit about the work that we've been doing on the mental side as well.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I know that you've been talking to me about trying to pick courses that are maybe flat or even a slightly downhill so that I'm able to run that marathon pace and feel a little more comfortable. And I'm not always able to do that with my hectic schedule. A lot of times I just right out the door and run wherever I can. Like you said, it is a little higher altitude. We live in a hilly area, and so yeah, we're trying to be as creative as we can, and I'm trying just to make the most with every one of these workouts, and knowing that I'm able to train my legs to run that speed, and it's probably going to feel a little easier when I get to Chicago.
Yeah, isn't it funny, right? There's two things that I need to say here that are so important is that the average marathon runner, the age group marathon runner, and you believe me, you're not average, right? I want to go back to the fact that you said it's kind of hard getting used to this lower mileage that I'm used to, and just so that our listeners know, Ryan is doing 80 miles a week, right? So he's calling that low mileage, right? Anyway, that the average age grouper runs slower on a flat course than they do on a rolling course. And that's nothing to do with the fact that, yeah, flat courses should be way faster than rolling courses, right? Because you can never make up the time on a downhill that you lost on the uphill because of the amount of time that you were running on the uphill. So to explain that that's a mental issue, it's very difficult to focus. So if you're running in a bubble and the pace that Ryan's going to be running at, there are going to be a lot fewer runners around him, right? The elites are going to be way down the road, and Ryan's going to be running round about the pace of some of the elite women, right? They're going to be running somewhere between 220 and 240. So in that kind of range. So he's not going to have a lot of company, and it's really difficult to concentrate on pace because it's so easy to drop 3 or 4 seconds per mile when you're running at that pace. So it's a concentration thing. So you really want to look for informal rabbits, right? You want to find people that are running at about the pace that you need to run at, that you're just working a little bit to keep up with them. And that can be difficult at that point in the run, is to concentrate on pace there. The other thing that I wanted to mention here that I think will be very useful is the work that you're doing with Matt showing up, right? So we know there's physiological improvements in economy and in leg speed, but even this morning, we started this podcast a little late because we were doing some last minute mechanical stuff. Speak about how that now sounds to you, working on, your elbow angle at this late stage in your preparation process.
Yeah. I've definitely benefited from having some feedback from you guys as we go along to continue to improve my stride, improve my running form. And right now we are working on the little bit of an elbow. I think I have the tendency to run a little too tight with my arms. And so we're working on trying to loosen that up. And it's been great working with Matt because, we find something like that and he can put together a great recommendation of something that's on RunFORM to, some sort of a mobility drill or something, with bands that'll help resolve that. So I think there's just a few things that we're still trying to work on, and hopefully we'll get it just as right as I can get before race day.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak a minute on starting with the basics, and we always talk about this. So what you're referring to now is going back to some of the movements that I think are more of a priority for you to focus on now. And those movements will establish a much greater change for you on the day, but in large part because you have built this base of yours, right? So in my mind, first of all, I would like to talk about how you've managed to follow your RunFORM protocol on a daily basis, being a busy businessman and father, because it's not always easy. And that's why I think you're on here, speaking to the population that are not professional athletes. And most of our clients obviously are not professional athletes. So we do want to talk about how we manage that in a day. It's not always perfect, but it's doable. And you've been so consistent with it that's why we can continue to make some positive changes even now in this stage of the game, Ryan.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, what you give me in mobility drills or different my protocol to work on daily is, I've got it down to where it takes about 8 minutes or so. It's not a real big time investment. And coupled with the fewer miles that I'm running, I think I'm training less overall than I have previously. So these types of things, working with bands, I can do almost anywhere. I can do them at home. Sometimes I can do some of these movements in the office. So it kind of works I can make it work within my schedule. I'm also someone who's good at just following a plan. So if it's on my calendar, I'm going to do it. It's like a meeting or anything else. If it's there in my day, I'm going to make time for it. And sometimes I do have to juggle, and I'll touch base with you, or I'll touch base with Bobby. Maybe I'll have a business trip, and then we'll get kind of creative and we'll move things around a little bit. But all in all, I found it, I am busy, but I'm good at managing those minutes, and this program's been good for me, being able to fit it all in.
Yeah, when I say it's not always perfect, I love the example that your kids started back up in their school year after having the summer off. All of a sudden now you're making dinner because they're at their dance or boxing practices, right? And you're also establishing a new ritual with their homework and all of these things. You're a very present father, of course. I love that. And you don't sacrifice any of that. But we did have to make some adjustments a few weeks ago, realizing that, hey, we have a different schedule now. So I want to highlight this a little bit, because I think it helps people to understand that you can manage these things. It's just a little bit of planning in pencil, making adjustments with a plan, but you do have to use that eraser sometimes and readjust.
That's true. Everything is not always perfect. And with the kids back in school, it did kind of just, throw us into a whirlwind for a couple of weeks. You guys were helpful. And I think we took a week of just really focused on recovery. For me, I was a little sleep deprived. I would stay up a little late or get up a little early just to squeeze in my workouts because we have late nights now with the kids' sports and all that. So I focused really hard 1 week on recovery, and then we managed to make it work, and I'm still trying. I find that I benefit by doing these little things, whether it be mindfulness, little short meditation or breath work, which Matt's helped me a little bit on some breath work, and all those things kind of help balance it out.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I'll wrap up this first part of the conversation. Again, we're going to be back talking about post-marathon. But before we even know the results of the marathon itself, and on the day, a lot of things can happen, right? But I think the process that you've been through, we're excited because we know that, yes, we want a good marathon. Chicago is the goal, and we want to run a new PR. That being said, we know that we've built such a great foundation that 2024 can be even better. Right. So it's not just about one day anymore. It's about longevity. And when I think back in the beginning, if I were to give you some highlights, it would be that you are such a great trail runner. I think boxing helped tremendously with that. I think that's a great sport to cross train with. That in your background certainly helped a lot. But that being said, we had to work a lot on single leg stability. We had to work a lot on how our foot was feeling the ground. So all of those proprioceptive qualities. But I want to be clear that we don't just do balancing drills, and we don't just do things that are, let's say, just the basics, although that's the foundation. We move from that mobility and motor control, and we start to really focus on good loading in that single leg and opposite arm. We start to really work on that coordination and control under load. So I'm going to now just skip forward to where we're at now. We're doing a ballistic movement that's with med ball slams. And we were just reviewing this movement yesterday with Bobby. We ended up having you do this in about 5.5 seconds for 6 ground contacts with a 14-pound med ball, not the kind that bounces off the ground easily, but the softer kind that you really have to slam that ball down. And that total body integration, that total body control that you've established now, it's not just a little bit faster, it's a lot faster. We couldn't break 7 seconds for 6 contacts initially. Now we're down to 5.5 seconds. So I know that you have established better neural drive, and that's just one example of it. And that's got to be a great confidence booster for you as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Seeing from where I came to where I am now, I've gained a lot in coordination and control. And that's the biggest thing I think I found a difference in. It's really being able to coordinate my full body integration into running. I'm still not perfect at it, but I've noticed a huge improvement there thanks to you guys. And I am noticing a lot more power. We've been getting into some power movements and deadlifts. And, I've noticed, the numbers speak for themselves. We've grown a lot in my strength numbers, and I'm feeling that out on my runs. My runs are feeling easier. I'm so far, this has been a good process. And for me, for longevity, this is something I think that I can sustain over time. And regardless of how Chicago goes, I know that I'm challenging myself to become a better runner. I've seen a lot of growth, and I think I still have a lot more out there on the table that I can grab from and take into challenges into next year and beyond.
Yeah, and with that base that you have now, your sharpening phase is what we're working on finally here in the last few weeks. And it's just basically mastering the RunFORM pillars at this point. And we are just getting those basics mastered, remastered, tested, trained, and retested again. And that's what I want to finish this part of the podcast with, is that's going to bring us home. And that's the sharpening work. And that is why I believe that we're going to be able to set ourselves up. We can only control what we can control, but we're certainly doing that. We have not had the old injuries of the past come up and take away from our training. And that in itself is such a huge win. That's what I mean by longevity. Yeah. That's what I mean by being able to build confidence, not just for the day, although this is going really well, but also thinking ahead to, geez, like you said, 10 years from now, I think I'll still be able to do this. I'm not breaking myself down and wearing myself out in order to get these goals.
That's right. In previous marathon training, right about now is the time where the wheels start coming off the bus, and I've just overdone the training. I think I probably peaked too soon. I feel I'm running fast. Everything's great. And then about a month out, little issues start popping up. No major injuries, but just little things. And they slow me down in my training in the final month. And I can happily say right now, I'm feeling super healthy and very confident to tackle the last few weeks coming up to Chicago.
Awesome. Well, like I say, I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. It's going to be a fun process to success. And certainly beyond that, the next few years, I think, are going to be even better. Bobby?
Yeah, no, there's so many things that you guys touched on. I don't even know if I can get to all of them as my final statement, right? But I think a good message that came through there for our listeners is that setting yourself up to run a marathon only based on whether your time is indicating to you whether you were successful or not is a real, it's a good way to set yourself up to fail, right? Because even over distances like the mile, you need such good circumstances to show up on the day. And then during the course of 26 miles, the likelihood that you're going to have a perfect day is very, very slim, right? So a lot of the elites train beyond the demands of competition in a marathon so that if they have a day that's slightly warm, that they can have a performance that's not their peak performance in terms of time, but they can have a peak performance in terms of the circumstances. And so for the age group athlete, that would mean is okay, I wanted to run 2:45 today, but it was a hot day, or it was a windy day, or it was a super cold day, or it was a slippery day. It was raining or something like that went on. And to be able to go, okay, who are the other people that would be running 2:45 in this race? What did they do, right? And if you were running 2 or 3 minutes faster than they were, maybe you ran a 253 or a 251 or something, and those guys were going 256, 257. That's kind of what you need to look at in those days, or even finishing the race, right? Sometimes the race is so hot. A couple of years ago, they had to abandon Chicago when I think about 60, 70% of the field hadn't finished, right? And they abandoned the race, which is disastrous because they had an unseasonably hot day, I think. So that's an important thing, is that the age group has learned that, oh no, I had a good race today. I didn't run a good time. I didn't run my goal time or my target time, but I had a good race. I got everything out of myself under these circumstances, right? And I think one of the mistakes that runners make there is if the conditions are off, they know the conditions are off, but they kind of hope. They start off at their goal pace and they kind of hope it will be okay. And it's never okay, right? Because there's no place to hide in the marathon. You have to adjust proactively in the marathon. That was the one message. And then the other thing, Matt, we started this podcast off with the concept of gather, right? And I think it's always a good idea to go back over what gather is so that people understand when you're running, all right, you are not running at a constant pace. Your devices might say you're running at a constant pace, but every time you put your foot down on the ground, you massively decelerate, right? And so that's the hallmark of an elite runner versus a non-elite runner, right? So a non-elite runner might have a ground contact time of, say, 350 milliseconds, right? Whereas the elite runner might have 160, 170 milliseconds that their foot is on the ground. So they're decelerating less than the non-elite runner, right? So where the gather comes into that is that as you go forward with your foot to put it onto the ground, your foot should be moving backwards when you put it on the ground. And that's the gathering. So you reduce the amount of braking. All right. So if you reach forward, you straighten your knee, you stick your heel out in front of you, you land with your shin leaning backwards, you're going to have a massive ground contact time and you're going to decelerate massively, right? So the gather is when you're pushing that foot down, right? Your thigh is straightening. It's bringing that foot closer to your center of mass. So your foot is actually going in the opposite direction that your body's going in. And it's very easy to pick up with high-speed photography who gathers well and who does not. And so with Ryan, what was so interesting is we have a better gather on his right foot than we have on his left foot. And so that allows Matt and myself to go, okay, so what's going on with the left hip, with the left knee, and where can we improve so that we get a more symmetrical gather on that left side? And so that's what this week has been about for us. So exciting stuff. So just for this first part of the podcast, I just say to Ryan, thank you so much for being vulnerable, being open. I think that provides a lot for, the thousands of people out there that are trying to get better at the marathon, when they might be past their absolute physiological best, which is somewhere in their mid-20s, right? That there's still a way to run PRs, especially in things like the marathon, right? I actually don't like coaching the marathon, even though I've coached an Olympic champion and I've coached a world marathon major winner. It's just there's just so many things that can go wrong. And it's just to have Matt on the team and to have the kind of mindset that you have, Ryan, it just makes it possible for us to eradicate as many of those variables as possible.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, excited for the next podcast when we hear all about your Chicago adventure.
All right. Can't wait.
As always, thanks for listening to the RunFORM podcast. And as a reminder, we offer a totally free movement improvement assessment on our Pendola Project website. Here, you can get your own personalized protocol that will help your running today. So give that a try. Also, Bobby and I are experts on Any Question app where you can ask us, any question. So reach out to us directly there. Finally, if you learned anything new today, don't forget to share it with your compadres and leave us a quick review. That really helps us a lot. All the links you need are in the show notes below. Till next time, have a great run.
Well, that was awesome. Yeah.